Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Atira. Today I'm going to be diving into the films that were made and adapted based on this book. And as you may know, and if you don't know, there are two films that were made based on this book. The first one is the Stanley Kubrick directed movie which was made back in the 60s in 1962, and Adrian Lyne's version of the same name, Lolita, in 1997, which is, I think, the most well-known adapted version of Lolita.
Broadway at dusk, and as the lights go on, the News of the Day camera records the welcome for Lolita, the film the whole town's talking about.
I love it when they haven't forgotten about your movie by dinner time afterwards, and they're still arguing about it the next day. That's what a movie should do. It should make you argue and disagree.
Which at that time, everything was opening up in the early 60s here in America, and it was scandalous.
She was low, plain low in the morning, standing 4 feet 10 in one sock. She was Lola in slacks. She was Dolly at school. She was Dolores on the dotted line. But in my arms, she was always Lolita.
So, these films have stirred many debates over the decades, each approaching Vladimir Nabokov's provocative texts with their own distinct tones, styles, and a lot of glorifying, actually. So before I begin, I would like to let you know that this series is a 3-part series, which will consist of me talking about the book, the films that were made based on the book, and also how Lolita affected society back then and how it still affects society now. So in my last video, I focused more about the book and the characteristics of the characters, Humbert Humbert and Dolores Hayes, and why Vladimir Nabokov wrote this book. So feel free to check it out after this video, or if you want to watch it beforehand, then feel free to do so. Also in my description box, I have also included a blog that I made. It's a step-by-step guideline on how to recognize and understand sexual behaviors from adults. Alright, to start, we all know that there are two films made based on Lolita. The 1962 version by Stanley Kubrick and the 1997 remake directed by Adrian Lyne, which stars Dominic Swan and Jeremy Irons. And the 1962 version, I'm sorry, I don't really know the actors and the actresses, but the 1997's version is one of the most, I think, not the most popular remake that most of you guys know. And some of us like it. Personally, I did not, because when I watched the 90s version, I was terrified. Actually, I will include my opinion later on. Alright, so these two films deviate significantly from the author's actual vision, which is to criticize adults' power to take a child's innocence away from him or her.
I've missed you terribly.
I haven't missed you. In fact, I've been revoltingly unfaithful to you. But it doesn't matter a bit, because you've stopped caring anyway.
What makes you say I've stopped caring for you?
Well, you haven't even kissed me yet, have you?
So Kubrick's version hints at the disturbing nature of their story, but falls short of capturing Dolores' victimization. Instead, it leans towards a dark comedy and blurs the line between criticism and glorification of Humbert's obsession. So the 60s version is when the aesthetic of Lolita began. The heart-shaped sunglasses, the lollipop, and the sensual version of Lolita that we all know. And sadly, when we think of Lolita, we think of those things. In 1962, Stanley Kubrick took on the challenge of adapting Lolita for the screen. The era's censorship rules prevented Kubrick from delving too deeply into the novel's explicit contents, as Humbert, played by James Mason, is almost pitiful, portrayed more as a tragic anti-hero than a predatory adult, which is what this book emphasized. And while the adaptation has its own artistic merit, the relationship between Humbert and Dolores seemed to be slightly toned down than what we have seen and read from the book. So Sue Lyon, who plays Dolores Hayes, was just 14 at the time, and as you may know, Dolores in the book is 12, while in the film they aged her up, just so that people won't find it more disturbing than it actually is. So just so that, they won't disturb the audience. But the film aesthetic choices make her appear more mature and more sensual in a sense. Kubrick, therefore, unintentionally presents a version of Lolita that is more of a tragic, forbidden romance than an actual disturbing film about an adult taking away a child's innocence, which is what this book is mainly about.
Oh, come on. She's the only friend I've got in this stinking world. You never let me have any fun.
No fun? You have all the fun in the world. We have fun together, don't we? Whenever you want something, I buy it for you automatically. I take you to concerts, to museums, to movies. I do all the housework. Who does the tidying up? I do. Who does the cooking? I do. You and I, we have lots of fun. Don't we, Lolita?
Come here. Still love me?
Completely. You know that.
Alright, so if you don't know, Stanley Kubrick is known for his film Shining, which is a horror film, and his stylistic choices for the film Lolita leaned heavily on visual innuendo, clever dialogue, and suggestion. He used shadows, soft lighting, and subdued scenes to imply the nature of Humbert and Dolores' relationship. But in avoiding overt depictions, due to censorship, Kubrick also sidesteps much of the horror inherent in Humbert's obsession. The darker predatory aspect of Humbert lost in favor of a more subtle, almost sympathetic version of him, which is not true. As you may know, Humbert is a disgusting human being, which tricks the audience into thinking that, oh, Humbert is actually a nice guy, he's being seduced by this very mature young woman. Mind you, despite her being 14 in the film, she was still a child, alright? Now, let's move on to the 90s version of the film, which is the 1997 Lolita starring Jeremy Irons and Dominic Swan, which is the well-known adaptation from my personal opinion.
I looked and looked at her, and I knew as clearly as I know that I will die, that I loved her more than anything I'd ever seen or imagined on earth. She was only the dead leaf echo of the nymphette from long ago. But I loved her, this Lolita, pale and polluted and big with another man's child. She could fade and wither, I didn't care. I would still go mad with tenderness at the mere sight of her face.
So Adrian Lyne's 1997 adaptation took things further, making the story almost a tragic love affair rather than a cautionary tale. Lyne's approach sensualizes Dolores and Humbert's relationship, portraying them in a more emotionally reciprocal, which is a dangerous thing because not only he glamorizes Dolores once again, but he also dismissed the narrative of the actual abuse. The reason why the author, Vladimir Nabokov, wrote this book is because he wanted to condemn the exploitation of children. But both films, both the 90s and the 60s version, failed to reciprocate that and made films and turned them into a sort of like a tragic, forbidden romance, which is honestly why? Like, it's about abuse, ladies and gentlemen. It's not romance, please. So, in 1997, Adrian Lyne took a more direct approach with Lolita. Lyne is known for his provocative films like Fatal Attraction, which is one of his most well-known films, sought to explore the sensuality and the intensity of Humbert's relationship with Dolores and his obsession towards her more explicitly. However, this new style brought new challenges. By closely following Humbert's mind and his imaginations, many of the scenes in the film are very intimate, almost in a romantic way, which he risks portraying Humbert actions in a way that can mislead viewers into sympathizing with his character once again.
If I tell you how naughty I was at camp, promise you won't be mad.
Tell me later. I want you to go to bed. I'll go downstairs while you... And when I come up, I want you to be asleep. All right?
So, in my opinion, when I watched the 90s film, I watched it before I read this book, by the way. I think that some of the scenes from the film are quite close to the book. However, there are still some underlying sensual tones in the film. And when I watched it, I thought, oh, Dolores truly wants to be with Humbert, when in fact, she did not. Like, she really wanted to run away from him. But most of the scenes from the film are very close to things that happened in the book.
We made up very gently that night. You see, she had nowhere else to go.
Right, whilst Lyne adaptation is more explicit and focuses more on Humbert's obsession towards Dolores and his imagination and his inner turmoils, it still falls short of critiquing and emphasizing the abuse. In attempting to show Humbert's inner struggles, Lyne's Lolita takes on a sensuous quality, like I said, using warm lighting, close-ups that can make Humbert's predation more like less grotesque and more like a doom, basically like a doom tragic romance. This stylistic choice, however, while aesthetically very appealing, often blurs the moral boundaries that Vladimir Nabokov wanted to make it clear when he wrote this book. Right, then, to understand how these films diverge from the book's message, let's compare a few key scenes. One notable moment is Hamlet's initial encounter with Dolores. In both adaptations, the scene is presented with distinct tones. Kubrick's version is quiet and restrained, relying on subtlety, while Lin is far more charged, focusing on Hamlet's inner desires and inner dialogue. Each adaptation chooses to frame this scene in ways that differ greatly from the novel, emphasizing Hamlet's perspective rather than Dolores' actual experience. This choice has a significant impact, pushing the audience closer to sympathizing Hamlet's characteristics and his actions. Both of these films have one major flaw, which is they focus primarily on Hamlet's perspective rather than Dolores. Nabokov's novel does the same, however, there are still certain scenes and certain dialogues that truly captured what Dolores' actual feelings towards Hamlet, but those films did not emphasize or even included Dolores' actual feelings towards Hamlet and the things that he had done to her, which erases her actual victimhood. This choice is very harmful as it inadvertently glamorizes the toxic dynamic between the abuser and the victim. In the end, both the 1962 version and the 1997 version of Lolita failed to portray the actual message of the book, which is about an adult having an immense amount of power to take away a child's innocence and to take away someone's childhood away from them in a blink of an eye. And it also reflects the challenges to portray this book into film. Kubrick's version, restricted by censorship at the time, sacrifices depth to suggestion and subtlety, sometimes at the cost of clarity. And Lin's version, however, though more explicit due to the current, the 90s where people can do whatever they want at the time, much more less restrained than the 60s, risk romanticizing Hamlet's obsession towards Lolita, and both films have left a lasting impression in pop culture, and both of them fail to capture Vladimir Nabokov's critical view of Hamlet's action. The legacy of Lolita as a misunderstood tale continues, reminding us of a fine line between adaptation and misrepresentation. So in my opinion, compared to the 60s version, which I did not watch fully, but I have watched certain scenes on YouTube, and 90s version, which I watched the full movie like twice, I think the 90s version, like I said, most of the scenes are quite close to the book. However, there are many sensual innuendos and sensual tones in the film, which is similar to the 60s version. However, in the 90s version, we get to see a little bit more of Dolores, but still we did not get to see more of her the way we have seen her in the book. So that is all from me. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next week with a new video, and I will be focusing more on the effects of Lolita towards society and how back then it was controversial and how it still is pretty much one of the most vital pieces of literature in society today. Bye.
It's possibly a sad comment on the times that, of course, it looks far less daring than it must have done in 1962.
Well, it wasn't done in a daring way.
No.
It's a daring book, but it wasn't a daring film because what Kubrick saw in it was a love story. And it's true that even then, many other directors would have chosen to do it as an essay in sexploitation. But he saw it as a love story, and he contended, quite rightly, that all the most powerful classic love stories of literature had dealt with star-crossed lovers, or that is to say, lovers who were prevented from getting together by the dictates of the morals or the politics of the time. Abelard and Eloise, or well, that was a little something. But Romeo and Juliet, and it was always the same sort of pattern.
Mm-hmm. Did you know what the story was about?
Yes, I did.
Mm-hmm.
My mother had read the book, and we discussed the story. And she knew of their previous work.
Mm-hmm.
She knew that Mr. Harris and Mr. Kubrick do very artful pictures, and that they are not a quickie film company.
Mm-hmm.
She had quite a bit of faith in them.
Mm-hmm. And this phase, I think, wasn't disturbed. Did you work in a facile way, in an easy way?
In an easy way?
Mr. Kubrick?
Yes, very easy. There was never any pressure while making the picture. Everyone was very happy and very at ease.
It's about a man who fell in love with somebody he lost, with a dream that he lost, Annabelle, and who remained in love with.
I think that Humbert is more in love with his memory of the woman he lost.
Will not necessarily choose the nymphette among them. You have to be an artist, a madman, in order to recognize the little deadly demon among the others.